So, in this week's Torah portion, Parshat Bo, we read about the final 3 plagues in Egypt. We have the locusts, we have the darkness so thick like you can't even see your hand in front of your face, and of course the death of the firstborn. We have the establishment of the Passover holiday, and finally, the life-altering, world-changing, history-making moment when Pharaoh finally releases the Israelites from slavery. He may or may not have had a little prodding by God through those plagues. It's pretty bad. But we are also, in this week's Torah portion, introduced to another concept from our Passover Seder that we are very familiar with, that of the 4 children. So the ancient rabbis, based the 4 children when they were creating the Haggadah off of a couple of 4 questions that are asked in the Torah, 3 of which are asked in this week's Torah portion. So, because you know I'm going to every time I'm up here, who are the 4 children that we read about in the Seder? What are they? Wise. That's what I always insisted I was in my Seder. Simple. Wicked. That's what I always made my sister read. And the one who doesn't know how to ask a question. So the questions they ask do come, again, mostly from this week's Torah portion. But when we think about who these children are, if we were to try to think of positive and negative attributes, just using the word like the wise child, what's something positive you might say about someone who is defined as wise? Intelligent. Circumspect. Studious. So maybe they did something to get smart. And if we're thinking of something negative, you might say, what? Positive? You might think they're positive. If you're thinking of something negative, you might say about the wise child, especially based on how we think of the wise child in the Passover Seder. Does anyone have any thoughts? Not that you could say here. Nathan? Arrogant. Precocious. Sure. So let's try the wicked child. What is something positive we could say about the wicked child? Positive. He's positively wicked. That's excellent. He exists. He might be creative. Yeah, someone that kind of pushes us, challenges us, so we have to become stronger in what we think and believe. So your positive is that he's happy about being wicked. He has time to change. That's interesting. It's an interesting way to put it. And what are some negative things about the wicked child? He might be a bully. Exclusive. Doesn't always accept things just right when he hears them. He could have been bullied. So, we have if you remember, the wise child asked, like, what are all the laws and precepts? And so this child must have had a rabbi for a parent. Shira can tell me if I'm right or wrong. But the response to that child is to tell them everything, even though the child is asking specifically, what are all these laws and precepts to you? And then it's with the wicked child who asks, what does this even mean to you anyway, that all of a sudden we're upset about them using the word you? And so we're supposed to remind them that if they were in slavery, they would not be freed. So we can do this for the other children as well. But there's some alternate understandings of these children. Some questions offered by Rabbi Miriam Spitzer. She asks, is the wise child smart or just a smart aleck? You've heard that word before, haven't you? That phrase. Is the wicked child bad or just challenging? And one of the things I wonder is, what is so bad about looking for personal relevance? I think that's what a lot of us do here in Reform Judaism as well. She asked, was the simple child really simple or just observing all that he or she hears, tastes, touches, sees, and smells? And was the fourth child unable to ask a question or just unwilling to do so? And I also wonder, or has this child been silenced by the adults around the table? And it seems kind of silly to me. I also always had trouble with this, even though I was the wise child and my sister was the wicked child, and I did like that part. But I always had trouble with the responses given to the children, which, is to describe the miracle to the wise child, to the wicked child, remind them that they wouldn't have been saved had they been in Egypt. For the simple child to really just go over the story in the simplest terms, and for the child who does not know how to ask, just go ahead and tell them. So it made me wonder, how many times have we been in the position of being a know-it-all, or wondering how something is relevant to ourselves, or needing someone to review the basics, like maybe on, Microsoft Word or anything like that? I may or may not be looking at someone over there. I've helped him. Or feeling like you don't even know what question to ask. I think we actually learn a lot more about the answerer from our Haggadah to the response to each question than we do about the child asking the question. When a child asks, what do you mean by this? What does this mean to you? And our response is, it means you wouldn't have been freed from slavery if we'd been in Egypt. That like I said, tells me a lot more about the adult answering the question than the child answering it. So I think it's kind of interesting that it's the children who are categorized and not the adults who are answering. But none of us can be summed up by one word, especially just by the word wise, wicked, simple, or not knowing how to ask a question. We know we're more complex than that. Sometimes we are wise, sometimes we're wicked, sometimes we're simple, sometimes we're silent. And sometimes we hold seemingly contradictory things or feelings at the exact same time. Our tradition acknowledges this idea in many ways, this idea of holding things that may seem opposite together. And one thing is to think about our service tonight. So if you think about our service, we go from moments of joy to moments of sadness, moments of fear to moments of hope, moments of blessing to moments of loss. So it's not impossible that we are more than one thing, even if it seems opposite. Modern scholar Dr. Wendy Zerler states that the use of the word keneged, which is, part of a different part. So there's a part that talks about the, here we go, keneged arba banim dira Torah. That is how this part of the four children is introduced. And that word, that usually translates to, the Torah alludes to four children, and then it goes into the four children. However, here, we are reminded that this word keneged, the word neged, actually means against or opposed. But again, it's translated as like, here are four different children. And so this rabbi translates, Rabbi Spitzer, instead of the Torah alludes to four children, is the Torah speaks against the notion that there are four children, because neged could mean against. So like I said, none of us can be summed up by just one word. But we also go back to this word keneged because it connotes both opposition, but can also connote a sense of correspondence, of interacting with someone else. And Dr. Wendy Zerler says the word neged, again, meaning oppose or contradict, shares the same Hebrew root with the word magid, which is what we call the telling of the story at our Passover Seder. I know, I was like, oh, right. It's like if you know Hebrew, like it makes sense, but you just don't think about it. So this idea of opposite or opposed and the telling is what magid means with the root nun gimel daled. Dr. Zerler teaches that these two words sharing the same root indicate that a proper telling of the Exodus story requires a group of people who share certain values, but also can occasionally disagree. The lesson of the four children, then, is not that we should judge people harshly and pigeonhole them based on one comment or question. Rather, I think the four children are part of the Passover Seder to teach us that we can still share values whether or not we always agree, including sometimes within ourselves. We might have contradicting beliefs. And so it is within our community that we also have a set of shared values, but we might not always agree with each other. And my prayer for this evening is that we think of the 4 children whenever we find conflict, and remember that conflict is a natural part of being in relationship and telling our story. Shabbat Shalom.